A good evening to you, our lovely viewers. You're welcome to the Green Talk Show, proudly brought to you by My Tree Initiative Uganda. We are here again, as it always happens on every Friday from 7:30 to 8:30, bringing you the Green Talk Show live on our Facebook page, that is at My Tree Initiative Uganda. And then we are also able to share these programs with you on our YouTube channel. My name is Nabakawa Safina Haula. I am your host for tonight. I'm very sure for those of you that have been following us, we usually have, we have different hosts that come in. There's 3 of us. And then we also have different guest speakers that join us where we're able to discuss different topics regarding climate action in our country and the whole world at large. So for tonight's show, we have 2 guest speakers. We have Mr. David Birungi. We also have Mr. Laston Gulume. So for tonight's financing, that is the role of the private sector in the role of the private sector financing in climate change mitigation. And I'm very sure for tonight we have the right guests for that, especially Mr. David Birungi. Mr. David Birungi will be coming in to tell us about what the private sector has to do when it comes to climate action in our country. He's the head of public relations at Airtel Uganda and has a very great experience in stakeholder and corporate relations. I'm very sure, as some of you might be, wondering, how is Airtel coming into climate? But I'm very sure Mr. David will be explaining that to us for tonight. So allow me for now welcome Mr. David Birungi. He's going to tell us about himself. David Birungi is going to be coming in to tell us who he is, what he does at Airtel, and we'll continue from there. You're welcome, Mr. David. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and all the organizers of this event. Like yes. You've heard, my name is David Birungi. At Airtel, I'm in charge of public relations management. Basically, those of you are wondering what public relations is about. It's really building goodwill so that the activities of your business or of your projects generate the necessary goodwill to support the work and the communities within which the work happens for the long term. So a relationship is something that takes long to build, and there has to be a deliberate effort. So that takes much of my day to ensure that the business I represent, in this case, Airtel Uganda, the work we do, especially the work we do in the communities, is all-inclusive. It involves the community and benefits the community. One time I was asked, is profit good or bad? Profit is good as long as you're sharing the value of it with the rest of the community within which you work. And at Airtel, especially coming from Airtel Africa, we have made a strategic decision that we shall go out to transform our lives by doing business that is compliant, business that is cognizant of the environment within which we work, and also business that shares the value of what we do with the rest of the community through education, through health and environment. Those being the pillars for our transformation and sustainability agenda.
Thank you so much, Mr. David. My question would be, you've talked about, dealing with the different sectors of education and then environment. What are the specific programs that Airtel has put in place that are really coming up and working towards, the betterment of our environment in the different areas and, different districts in the country? What are some of those programs that Airtel is running at the moment? Over to you.
They say knowledge is power.
Yes.
At Airtel, our role is to ensure the transfer of knowledge from one point where it is created to where it is applied. And usually
Yes.
that's where education comes in.
Mm.
And this is passionate to me because I am originally a teacher actually. I left my career to go
Oh,
and
that's
teach
great.
economics and geography. It will interest
Mm.
you how much I'm interested in the issues of climate change, because these are things I have lived and I encourage others to do. So at
Yes.
Airtel, we know that to be able to sustain the climate agenda as is ongoing is to ensure that the right information is being transmitted. So we have a program that looks at what we call adopt a school. We look at some of the disadvantaged schools, we adopt them to ensure that they have the right
Yes.
learning environment, and to ensure that we actually give them the right internet to connect the world. Because we believe that once you deliver internet to a school in Wundugujo, to a school in Kaberamaido, in Chidera,
Yes.
and we have the capability on our 4G network to deliver that, that school is able to connect a classroom where a conversation on climate change happens.
Yes.
That's the intervention we can make. Some of the schools cannot afford. So we come in to ensure that we do that. We also have, so we look at the usage, how many students are being assisted to learn in that environment,
Yeah.
and also understand. In our operations, previously we were using, and our partners, of course, lead batteries on the market. But we decided to take a strategic decision to start phasing out the use of lead batteries in the environment. These are batteries that are in masts. We have now shifted to lithium-ion batteries. And we are continuously doing that to ensure that by 2023 or thereabout, we have phased out all lead batteries because we know the impacts of lead in the environment.
Yeah.
We are also moving to phase out diesel generators on masts where we operate, because we know that diesel generators emit CFCs that will damage the ozone layer and therefore increase the warming of the globe. So we're going to see many of our masts and some of our partners we work with to ensure that they are moved to renewable energy, which is solar, and also powered by lithium-ion batteries, which are environmentally friendly compared to the traditional lead batteries as we know them. So that's some of the intervention, but we'll not stop there. We would also like to spend some money on community-based projects that are intent on restoring the environment and that. We also recognize that we must conserve water. Within our operations within the telecom, we have made a decision that we shall recycle as much as possible. We shall reuse as much as possible. So we're encouraging our own people to conserve water because we know it is a finite resource. If you have one of the small things, like what people think are small, would you rather have your own water bottle or have the disposable cups as we know them? So we are phasing out disposable cups because they end up back into the environment. Let someone have his water bottle, which he will use throughout the day. He goes back in the evening and washes it. Tomorrow he carries it. By the end of the day, if someone is taking 250 ml of water, he would have used maybe 10 plastics by the end of the day. But if you limit him to only his water bottle, it is one. If there are 10 people, it is 10 bottles. You know, on the rivers, those would be about 100 bottles. So those are some of the actions we are taking internally to make sure that people start having that conversation. And we're having monthly conversations about some of these things internally. We're not stopping there. We're also moving into our supply chain to ensure that our partners, one of the things that we phased out was the scratch card in our market, because the scratch cards would end up into the water channels and broke the drainage, and because they were a hazard, they were waste within the environment. So we removed them. If you want to top up, we have mobile money, and then these days, when you top up, then you have a chance of actually winning and getting money. But that's a conversation for another day. But we removed scratch cards from our environment, or recharges on E. So those are some of the things we are doing. Thank you.
I see. I don't know if Howell has dropped off. David, are you able to see her on your side? I think she may have dropped
I
off.
don't see Haura, but if Haura is having trouble with the internet, we after this call, we can sort her out. We have some of the best internet. It is internal to us. Even where we have problems, I would like to come to you to your rescue, and we have them sorted out.
I saw one of the people who is following on Facebook says they are logged in using their Airtel and the internet is very good this Friday. So I think that recommendation, David, if Paula is having internet issues, that recommendation would be a very good one. You made quite some very good remarks there. I remember the time when you were phasing out the scratch cards. It felt quite inconveniencing. Personally, we felt we were used to, if you want to buy any airtime, you go get a scratch card. And today, it has become very easy. I want to load anything on whether it's data or it's airtime or by minutes. Our host is back. Kaula, David had recommended to you to get an Airtel line.
Actually, as I just been put backstage, but as listening to whatever he was saying, he
Oh,
has talked about Airtel being able to provide network for everyone, and I believe with this era, I should say the .com, you find that there's nothing that can be done without any person being connected to the internet. And like Alaston has said, the Freaky Friday does us some good work. Those 3 days of enjoyment nonstop. It is really great. The other thing that I wanted to comment about what Mr. David was saying is that they usually partner with different organizations, and I should say, some time back, we had a trees of remembrance planting, and we actually had a representative from Airtel. He joined us that time we were in Kawempe. He was able to join us, and he planted some trees in remembrance of a loved one that he had lost due to COVID-19. So I believe Airtel is doing tremendous work in environment action. So allow me take this opportunity for now to come over to you, Mr. Laston, to give us a brief introduction about yourself and tell us what APL East Africa is before we can proceed into environmental action and the private sector coming in and financing this. Over to you, Laston.
thank you so much, my dear sister Howla. Friends who are watching online, who are joining us for this weekly broadcast. My name is Laston, Laston Gulume. I work with Africa Law Practice, what Howla is calling ALP. In East Africa, we work in Kenya, in Nairobi. We work in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. We're in Uganda, and we have a partner office in Juba, South Sudan. We are a regional integrated law practice and consultancy private sector office. So we are doing business. We are doing business in East Africa. East Africa is our home. Personally from Uganda, I sit in the Kampala office, and majorly we are doing legal services. So that is LP East Africa, Aula.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to have you today. Regarding our topic tonight, the engagement of the private sector, what would you think is, the role of the private sector in mitigating climate change in our country?
Thank
Last
you,
and over
Howla.
to you.
David has kicked us off on a very good discussion point by actually demonstrating where you have a private company in the telecom industry, demonstrating the steps that they have taken practically to participate in issues or initiatives that are intended in one way or the other to foster proper environment friendly practices, if I may call them that way. So Airtel as a very big player in the Uganda industry, initially, until I heard David talk about one of the reasons behind scratching, or removing the scratch cards. You needed to buy airtime. You get a very little paper. You have to scratch it, then get the code from there, and then you load airtime. And I'm hearing him today share with us by saying, "Oh, by the way, one of the reasons we have removed some of these services to move them to digital services, to move them to paperless services, is because they have an implication on the environment." I'll be honest with you, in that entire time I had been buying airtime and scratch cards. Of course, I was aware that after I've scratched this card, I have to dump it or I have to dispose it of properly. But I'll also confess to you that sometimes I didn't do that. Sometimes, probably where I bought the airtime from and I had loaded it, that's where I left it. And I left the responsibility to whoever had sold to me the scratch card to dispose it of. When you would move on the streets of Kampala or Jinja, where I come from, you would find all these scratch cards everywhere. And until the telecom companies like Airtel thought, okay, we can do something about this to save our environment, to have better business practice initiatives, which has saved us probably the loads of little papers that would be flying around. So, Howla, to your question, what can the private sector do, or what is the role of the private sector in this climate change mitigation and environmental change mitigation aspects? I want to highly commend my brother David, where he has started us from. And my straight answer to that is that, first, as businesses, us as service providers, we are not in manufacturing. Legal services, we are in the industry of service provision. But every private sector player, such as Airtel, such as any other manufacturer, such as any other service provider, we have a responsibility to adopt environmental friendly business practices. What does that mean? That means that even in our strategy, I am just borrowing the words of David, that even in the strategy that you're using, can you factor in a consideration that what we are going to be doing is going to be environmental friendly? Usually when projects are starting, mostly construction projects, an environment impact assessment is done, but that is at the start of the project. I think it is quite rare, legally speaking, that after the project has been established, that the company is going to be required to do an environment impact assessment, maybe 3 months or 10 months down the road. But on an annual basis, I am aware that companies, I'm aware that corporations, I'm aware that business players in the private sector continually go in the planning process. David, as a public relations officer, I think you're going to be reviewing your strategy from this year, or the strategy that you said to use at the beginning of the year, whether it worked. And in that review, I want to just call on every private sector player, including service providers like ourselves, that as you're coming up with your strategy, can you factor in best practices that are environmental friendly? I don't think on this talk show we'll go into the details and the technicalities of the different goals that are being set by the world players, by the national players. I think for me, speaking to fellow young people who are on the call, speaking to stakeholders who are on the call of this talk show that are following it, and those that will watch it later, I'm aware that this is aired on Facebook and it's aired on YouTube. So whoever is watching later, for me, my call to action and my thoughts are that as private sector players, whether you're in manufacturing, whether you're in service provision, whatever industry you're in, it is important that you adopt best practices that are environmental friendly. I won't look any further than what David said. Simple things like you're talking about scratch cards. If you have an alternative that is environmental friendly, go for it. It was possible. Nothing was stopping the telecom companies like Airtel to say, okay, for us, our business model is going to be, we give you your paper, you scratch it, you load your airtime. And they're saying, no, as technology is evolving, there is an efficient, effective way of doing this without littering the environment with paper. Of course, we know where paper comes from. The manufacturing of that paper comes from cutting trees. My little understanding of that industry teaches me so. So the more we go paperless, the less trees we are cutting, the less the less paper we are using, the more we can support environment effect, climate change mitigation initiatives. So I want to end with this in my answer, that basically under the understanding of climate change being the change in the weather conditions, which can be caused naturally by natural currencies, but also as human beings, as businesses, we have lots that we contribute. We have so much we contribute towards the climate change. So the mitigation strategy is in having those initiatives, having those business approaches and strategies that are mindful. If you keep it in your mind, say, we can do A, but there is option B, and you weigh these options not just against profit. My elder brother David talked about when he was asked about profit. He said profit is good, but it is good if you, I think, share it. If the use of this profit also involves benefiting the community, what we usually call the corporate social responsibility. So the private sector, and here private sector, we are talking about those entities that are not government owned or government run. We
Yes.
have one of them here, which is Airtel, and what they can do in helping mitigate, or in law mitigation means what can we do to either slow down the situation or not make the situation worse than it is. And we can do something about that by adopting those business practices that are environmental friendly. I hope that answers the question, Howler. Over to you, Howler,
Yes,
please.
Yes, thank you, Laston. You've talked about, sending this message to the young people. And it so happens that of late, we have, a number of young CEOs, that are coming up. The young people have ventured into lots and lots and lots of businesses. So that brings me to, us, you sending another message to the many young CEOs that we have. I actually have so many friends at the university that, are coming up to be CEOs. It being that some might have, might be, dealing in other, professions and everything, but then they make sure that they have those side hustles that come in. So what would be your advice to these young people? Is it okay for them to spare some little money from their profits that they're making, to give it towards climate change action? And how best could they do this? Over to you, Laston.
Thank you, Howler. The small companies we see today, what we call small
Yes.
and medium enterprises, it's just a matter of time. As they're
Yeah.
implementing the strategies they're implementing to make the profit that David referred to, they are going to become big companies. Airtel
Yeah.
is not the Airtel it was many years ago. It has kept growing. And
Yeah.
if at the center of the business strategy of any company, small or big, they are they are alive to the need to adopt practices that are environmental friendly. And these are simple practices, things that a Mitre initiative is doing. Plant a tree, participate in activities that show that you have the heart for the environment. And this is what we are saying. Uganda, let me come back home. Uganda's economy, since the time I was born and the short time I've really been alive, getting to the third floor of my life, has always been an agricultural economy. We rely so much in agriculture. My grandmother in the village, she has her garden where she gets her food from. When COVID hit, she was not looking at the food that government was giving in Kampala. She was going to her garden to get food from there. And what that means is that the moment we do not participate in mitigating, the moment we do not participate in helping to 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 relieve the pressure we are putting on our environment that is leading to the drastic environment weather changes or climate changes, it's of course going to affect our productivity as a country. So the young CEOs, the young entrepreneurs, and young here, I'm talking about 30 years and below, where I fall.
Yes.
For me, my call to them is that at the beginning of your business, it is very easy to look at profit. When you come to Kampala, when you come to the city to make money, it's very easy for you to think money, 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 money. I want to make that profit. And that can be your drive. Anyway, you're setting out to do business to make a profit. I think these initiatives and this talk show is intended to raise the awareness, which David talked about, that
Yeah.
can we continue to have that discussion where we remind ourselves that there is something called climate change and there is something that we can do about it. And actually, we can also give our money.
Okay.
When we look, yes, David, you are.
If I may come in there, you
Yes.
see, the COP26 just ended in Glasgow.
Yeah.
And one of the recognition resolutions that was made was that the next chapter of mitigating climate change should be private sector led. When the global temperatures rise, they don't care who is in government, they don't care who is in private, they don't care who is in community. They rise for everybody. When the floods
Yes.
come, they don't know who is brown, who is black. They come.
Yeah.
When we invade organisms, other organisms that we live on this planet Earth with, and they fight back and they find us in our spaces, they don't care who is on the ground floor, who is on the third floor, like my friend last one there. They don't care. They will attack. So in looking at climate change, and which the young people should know, is that we will not stop it. It is our duty to slow it down.
Yeah.
Their commitments, and I think I'll ask the admin to put them in the chat for people to see, that have been agreed upon from Glasgow, COP26. But top of it is that the fight against global warming should be private sector led, because that's where the biggest share of economic activity is. Government has a controlling power over resources, but the actual use of these resources happens within the private sector. The government will not come and say, please choose a polythene bag over a paper bag. No. The government will not come and say, please plant a tree. You have the land. In Uganda, you have your land. Now, the conversation like this one will say, please, you have the land. Yes, you can use it for other things. But at the edges of this land, put some trees. And then the private businesses within the community, like Airtel Uganda, the community within which we are, when we say that, can we support this conversation where it is happening in health centers, in education, in environmental conservation, those conversations, we can step forward. And this is why I said that when I saw this initiative, I said, no, let me come in here and support. In my previous role, I'm from the energy sector. And I've been instrumental in having these conversations on the African continent. When I was in the energy sector, I've now moved to telecom because I think I've served enough in the energy sector. And these conversations are there. I was a resource person for the Energy Leadership Platform that looks at how energy stories are told. For example, if you look at there's been conversation about the cutting of fossil fuel and the fossil fuel, that's wood principally, as a source of energy, and whether that financing should go in reducing the cost of energy to households. That's a very deep conversation we may not exhaust now. But that conversation cannot be only done by government. It has to be done by the private sector, because the cooking, the eating happens a lot in the private sector. So how do we finance that? The government can only come in and say decides to maybe it can cross-subsidize from young enterprising individuals like Laston, who will subsidize my mother deep down in Barara so that she can afford the energy. So the biggest discussion among here is bridging the energy gap between those who are energy rich and those who are energy poor. And that can make the difference. There are people who are using internet for, I could say, luxury. And it's okay, they can afford it. But we should have the private sector realize that, yes, we trade in the business of internet, which is nice, But then we come in and say there are people who need internet to do a medical scan. There are people who need internet to give pro bono legal services to someone who actually needs. They need internet to research. So right now we have, for example, partnered with the ABSA, which is a private sector-led business, to provide internet to public libraries in Uganda. ABSA is delivering computers. Right today, they delivered in Kavale Public Library. But computers in Kavale are not enough. So if you have a legal clerk somewhere in Kavale who is doing pro bono services for someone whose forest was cut, that's where we come in and say, no, you have free internet to be able to access that resource, read on that legal literature, and go and represent that woman in court so that she can save her forest. So they look like small interventions, but they're very, very, very impactful. For us at Airtel, we believe that we are more than the MBs. We are more than the minutes. It is what those MBs and the minutes are used for that makes the transformation that we are talking about in our society. And we believe that with partners like MTI, who we are engaging with right now, we'll be able to cause more conversation that is impactful, and this moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. You've made very two profound statements, and I want to just re-echo them. One, that when there are changes, drastic changes in our environment, in our climate, it does not matter where you are. Where I am for this conference, it's so hot in Zanzibar, and it's very easy for one to say, when I get to my hotel room, I'll put on the AC, or when I'm in the car, I'll put on the AC. But the food you eat is not grown in the room you're going to sleep or the AC car you're moving in. So these changes affect us all. And the other thing, which David, you've said, that the small things count, the small interventions count. Many times, I am aware that for my tree initiative, as a civil society organization, it's easy when you're pitching or selling to private sector entities and players that can you participate. They could probably be looking at the big picture. I don't have the $1 million to donate to you. I don't have these big support resources that you need. But as David said, the small initiatives are what count. The small initiatives are what count. The small steps, the baby steps that the Chinese say that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. The one tree you plant, those mitigation initiatives. David made a profound statement that we can't stop this. That is the truth. But what we can do about it is that we can slow it down, or we can choose not to make things worse. Because when we make things worse, we are not going to escape the effects of the devastating climate changes that will affect our food, our production, that will even generally affect the economy. When we have prolonged dry seasons, back in the village, you really you see these people feeling the prolonged dry season. They say, we may not be having food in the next 2 months, in the next 1 month. It rains a bit, then say, the rain has come, then it's not raining again. And we've had those disruptions. When we have the floods and Kasese is being swept away by the rivers, Nyamamba and so forth, these are effects. They are real effects that are felt by us who live in these countries and in these localities. So those small baby steps count a lot. Thank you, David. I just wanted to make that addition. Over to you, Haula.
Thank you so